What's up, guys? Welcome to another Dynasty Talk with Sam show. We got James and Steve here with me. Today, we are going to be going over a little buy now, sell later. So what do we mean by that? Basically, we're going to be talking about some players that you can acquire today and sell either mid-season or next off-season for a greater return than you're paying right now. So basically, guys you think that are going to grow in value and you can use that to improve your dynasty team. So super stoked to have James and Steve on. I don't know if this is your first show, but I know if it is, I'm excited. So James, if you want to say anything, and then we'll pop over to you, Steve, real quick.
I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you for having me on, Sam. I appreciate it, and looking forward to talk ball with you guys.
Steve, and this is this is my first show on the Dynasty Pros YouTube channel. I was a longtime writer there for the last few seasons. I got the OG shirt, but I'm very, very happy to be on the YouTube channel. So this is fantastic. You can follow me on Twitter, X or whatever the heck it's called anymore, at Fantasy Ladder, and check out my podcast called the Fantasy Ladder Podcast on the IDP Guys YouTube channel. But thank you, Sam, for having me on.
Yeah, of course. Stoked to get you guys on. Love having new people and new topics and everything. So let's just jump into it for the people listening. So yeah, buy low, sell high. That's our topic for today. So we're each going to go over a couple players. James, why don't you get us kicked off? Who's your number one player? No particular order, but just the first guy we're going to talk about today.
So my pick is going to be Raachad White. And I think that a significant amount of this buy now value comes from the community perception of what the Bucs offense is supposed to be this year. The obvious hole at the quarterback position, whether it's Baker Mayfield, whether it's Kyle Trask, I don't think anyone feels particularly comfortable with that situation. And I think that maybe some more casual fans or people that don't really kind of dive in and dissect everything are going to look and see, oh, well, that's the quarterback position. We're going to be playing from behind a lot this season, and that kind of devalues the running back position. So I think that's where a significant portion of that buy value comes from. But the hole at their quarterback spot is actually kind of works in favor for the value going up over the course of the season. So as of right now, Baker Mayfield is, projected to be in the lead for the QB1 spot. Since he's come into the NFL, he's been top 10 every single season in running back targets. Dave Canales, the OC for the Bucs, has been very vocal about, Raachad White's going to be a 3-down back for us. And talent-wise, he's really in a good spot to take advantage of that. This is a bit of a stat that I love when talking about Raachad White. So there's been 5 running backs to play for a Power 5 school who have averaged over a full season per game 90 rushing yards per game and 40 receiving yards per game. Raachad White is one of those. The other 4 are Saquon Barkley, Joe Mixon, Todd Gurley, and Christian McCaffrey. So very, very good company talent-wise to be in for the role that he's looking to take on. And I think that I submitted an article that Dynasty Pros will have up soon, Dynasty Dilemma on Raachad White, and kind of looking at the value you might be able to buy for. You could dump some wide receivers, in my opinion, other people might disagree, some particularly headache wide receivers, guys like Hollywood Brown, guys like Deontay Johnson that can't quite seem to get over that hump and tend to leave managers a little bit like, what am I doing here? Do I start him? Do I not? Type of player. Or you could look to maybe we talk about tier down, tier up trades, maybe age down a little bit, where if you were an owner of somebody like maybe Joe Mixon or Aaron Jones hitting that 27, 28, 29 running back cliff, one of them at a second, mid-second, late second is right in the ballpark value-wise. for what would be a fair deal for Raachad White. So it's not a huge price tag to get somebody who's about to walk right into a 3-down role with the skills to make it work. But I think where the downside to keeping him long-term, and this is why we're looking to sell maybe next offseason, early next season, is that offense is going to be in kind of a dicey spot next year. A lot of projections draft-wise have maybe the 3 overall, the 4 overall, Drake May as their draft pick. More of a pure pocket passer type of prospect. And their wide receivers are getting a bit older. Mike Evans is going to be up over 30 next season. Godwin, I think, will be 28 or 29. It's not exactly like the wide receiver room is stocked over there with, high caliber young talent. And it kind of feels like a spot where if you're going to get maybe a wide receiver or a running back 20 or better season out of Raachad White, that's a pretty enticing buy for somebody next offseason that's going to need that help. He'll be roughly 25-ish, 25 in a couple months heading into next season. And we always talk about, right, that running back cliff at that 27-year-old kind of age. So you maybe at most by hanging on to him, you get another season at most before the value starts to go down, and now you're losing on your investment. And I think that's a really good spot where we always talk about the volatility of the running back position. Well, if you can get a really, productive 1 year when you need them and then flip them for maybe an up and coming wide receiver and a pick or a package similar to that, where you can kind of build out the future of your team after getting the production you did for the 1 year. I don't really see how you can go wrong with that.
Steve, what do you think? Are you a Raachad White believer, or are you on the other side of the alley there?
Yeah, no, I think in a lot of leagues that I was able to draft him in last year in like the second round of rookie drafts, I'm very happy to have him, hold him. In a lot of those cases, he's my RB3 or RB4, so I love that. In startups, I'd be a little bit more comfortable with him as like an RB3, but overall, I do agree that he's very enticing for at least this season. I'm not really all that worried about the talent behind him, maybe except for like Sean Tucker, but it might be a little bit until he gets going, just with his like health concerns and things. I'm not particularly worried about who's behind him. So I think, it's kind of wheels up for him, at least in the first half of the year. So say he has a big spike in value, that might even be the best time to sell him off, It all depends on if you are looking to be a contender or if like he's like the only bright spot on like a rebuilding roster. You can kind of jumpstart that rebuild and send him off to a contender and that kind of thing. So yeah, I think that's a fantastic pick because I think people are kind of freaked out over the Tom Brady-less Bucks here. So yeah, I like that pick a lot, but I think he should be pretty safe, especially in PPR leagues for sure. I love that stat, James, about Baker having top 10 RB targets for his career. That's pretty nice. I like that.
Yeah,
or each year, yeah.
And it works out. It's kind of funny too, where a lot of people like to chalk it up to, oh, well, he's played with Kareem Hunt and Christian McCaffrey. It makes sense that he would be targeting the running back position. But then when you consider White's right in that tax bracket, if you will,
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I might be on the other side of this one, guys. I gotta say, I think what worries me most is that the Buccaneers have averaged like 44 passing attempts per game the last couple seasons with Brady there. And I just see this world and I'm concerned that number drops by 10, to be honest. Like, I just think that's not the way they're going to play anymore. And I think in that division, their hand may not be forced as much as we think. Like, I think those games might be close, and I think that may lead to less dump-offs. Now, your suggestion, all those trades, totally within the realm of something I would pay. I think my concern would be is that in most leagues, the Raachad White owner probably drafted him early second last year, let's say, and he's not going to sell for that. He's going to sell for more. And so I don't know if I would be comfortable paying that price, but I guess it depends on your build. I totally see a version where you sell him next offseason. If he has a top 24 year, all on board with that. So Steve, if you want to hop in with your number one guy, who are we talking about?
So for me, it's Sam Howell, the quarterback of the Commanders, or at least known now as the Commanders. I guess the future name of the team is yet to be seen. Current ADP on Fantasy Pros, he's going as QB 31, which actually was pretty surprising to me because I've been aiming for him in startups as like a late QB or like a back end QB 2 or like a kind of a luxury QB 3. Of course, he was drafted in the 5th round of 2022, which was very shocking to me. So that can kind of tell you what the NFL thinks about him. However, at this point moving forward, I think that there's a lot going in his favor. So he's surrounded by a very solid offensive core with room to grow. The Commanders at this moment are a little bit weak at tight end, so they can always improve on that in the draft next year, maybe Brock Bowers or whomever. But Dan Snyder is also gone from the Commanders. That's a W for everybody, not just Sam Howell. But also a massive upgrade in the offensive coordinator, and I believe as the likely eventual head coach in Eric Bieniemy. So love that for him and what he could do. However, he potentially could have a short leash with Jacoby Brissett, who's a solid vet who is behind him. So if he plays poorly, he could find his way to the bench with Brissett taking over, and the Commanders could always replace him in the draft next year, depending on what their record is, because it is still a pretty tough NFC East there with Philadelphia and Dallas at the top of it. I mean, three playoff teams came out of that division last year. So, I think what he can show based on what he did in week 18. Now, again, it's week 18 where not a ton of starters are playing, but he did finish as a QB1 in that league as he posted a rushing and a passing touchdown. So I really like what his upside could be, especially at QB 31. I think he could make a jump into next offseason startups as like a mid QB2. I see kind of a similar parallel with like Daniel Jones after the influence of Brian Daboll came into town. So I think that is definitely in order for Sam Howell.
What do you think would be a buying price for Howell right now? Superflex, obviously, I don't think anyone's really worrying about him in a 1 QB league as this guy that's about to change their season.
Correct. Yeah. So this was under the assumption, of course, that it was a Superflex format, of course. Oh man, a buying price. It could be kind of like an older vet, plus a little something, because there are some solid starters that, whose shelf life is kind of dwindling, right? It's like Aaron Rodgers, still very good. He is 39. Matthew Stafford, he's getting up there too. He's either 35, 36, still could have maybe a couple of good seasons left, depending on his health. So I don't know. I think I could see a scenario where someone's willing to take maybe a little bit of a higher upside in one of those vets, with guys like Cooper Kupp or like Garrett Wilson and Stafford and Rodgers' case with like a pick or two. I think either way that would be pretty fair all around. So it just depends if you want to kind of make a push to win that year or get a little floor with Sam Howell and then hopefully get the, yo-yo back up the following year.
Yeah, I totally agree with a lot of what you're saying. And I think those trade targets are very realistic. Like when you said Aaron Rodgers, like if I was a top half team, I'd be like, oh, I'll take Aaron Rodgers over Sam Howell every day. And that's a good trade, right? When you like both sides of the trade, that's something that most people aren't thinking about. Like people are so consumed with winning. It's just like, no, that's a good trade. Like if I was trying to win this year, I would take Aaron Rodgers. And if I was trying to lose, I could see that being like something where Aaron Rodgers' value will not go up. And just like you said, I think when you were saying value jump for Sam Howell, I was thinking kind of like, if he puts together a good year, I kind of think like the Kenny Pickett range of startups next offseason, where he's still a guy where people are still tentative about Kenny Pickett, but they're starting to lean into it like a little bit because he has the weapons. And that's kind of the Sam Howell thing is like, he's got the coach, hopefully now with Bieniemy, and he definitely has the weapons. So right. What do you think, James? Are you a Howell believer?
I actually like the very last point you made there. I think Bieniemy coming over from Kansas City, the pass-catching weapons they have in Washington are kind of eerily reminiscent of the gadget kind of stuff that they were able to do in Kansas City that were, is so fun to watch, such an explosive offense. I mean, you have last year, Curtis Samuel kind of resurgence out of nowhere as their gadget player, had a hell of a start to the season for him. John Dotson came on strong, especially, as a nice red zone weapon, making a couple of highlight reel touchdown catches. And then maybe a little personal bias for me, but, if anyone has a negative opinion on Terry McLaurin, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, the guy is a stud trapped on a bad offense for several years. So that he definitely does have the help there to kind of make that jump, and the offensive coordinator who is very familiar with kind of using those pieces to their full effect. So yeah, I definitely think it's a spot where he as an individual kind of has to make a jump and get acclimated and do what he's got to do. But if he doesn't, it's not for the lack of support.
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to move on to my first guy on the list today. And I'm going to go wide receiver just so we can cover a different position than we have already. And I'm going to go with Amari Cooper. And what I'm thinking here is I'm thinking more of a buy low, buy now kind of player and sell mid-season, right before that trade deadline. And I think what I'm thinking is that I don't really hear a bunch of hype about Amari Cooper right now. I think some guys that own him are, they're probably happy to have him as their wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. Can't say I've been seeing his name on Twitter at all or X, and so I just think the buying price right now is pretty affordable. He's going, next to Hollywood Brown, Christian Kirk, Amari Cooper, all those things. And if this Browns offense takes a step forward, like we're hoping it will with Watson returning to hopeful form this year, or I would even take 75% form, to be honest. I'm not even hoping for 100%. I just think Cooper could be a lot more valuable come week 12 if he's wide receiver 13. Like, that's going to poke up someone's eyes that is about to make the playoffs. And I don't think people are talking about it right now, to be honest. Like, I'm a big Elijah Moore guy. I don't hate Peoples-Jones. I like Tillman, but Cooper was like a very productive wide receiver with Jacoby Brissett last year. And some of that, I think Brissett played better than we thought, but also that was scheme and that was Amari Cooper, right? And those things are not going to change. And the other thing that I think is that division is I could see some points being scored in that division this year, a little more than in the past, where we think Ravens, Steelers, Browns, like pound the ball, Winter, running, Nick Chubb, but like if we're projecting the Ravens to have this new passing attack with Monken, and we know what the Bengals can do, and we're expecting a step forward from Kenny Pickett. That's the one. I still love Kenny Pickett. I really like the guy. I don't have QB1 aspirations for him, but I think he's a great QB2. I just think there might be some more offense in that division than we're thinking. And I think just the price on Amari Cooper right now is great. Like, I think you could go trade any one of these hyped players, hyped offseason guys, hyped rookies, those early second-round picks, whether it's Jonathan Mingo or if maybe there's a big Bateman fan in your league, or kind of that range where maybe you could pay an early second and a toss in, an early second and a late guy, early second and a third. And then come week 12, you're either using him to win, or if you don't want him, I think you could flip him for a 24 first right then. Like, anyone who needs a wide receiver, I just think that's a very realistic trade that we see happen in our leagues year after year after year, which is a contender buying a productive wide receiver to go win games. James, what do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree. Cooper's throughout his career shown he can do it. And I think one thing I'm big on talking about, like the buy now on Cooper, is I'm really big into looking at how can I use the public perception of a situation to my advantage. And currently there's this discourse been going on about, well, how does the Browns offense of old and, pounding the ball with Nick Chubb, this rushing attack with him and Hunt, how is that going to mesh with what Watson's used to when he's at full form from Houston, which is just throwing the ball all over the yard. And I think that kind of uncertainty can land you a real nice price to buy on him now. And if it does work out where Watson's throwing the ball all over the yard, to your point, right? Like mid-season, if you have, maybe top 15 numbers for Cooper, he's, 29 now, right? So yeah, 29 will be 30 headed into next season. I honestly could not agree more with your assessment. It seems like the perfect situation to kind of do what you can to get him on your roster now. And as soon as things shake out and you're able to find a contender or find a trade partner where you can upgrade a little bit and get more on your return, I think it'll work out really well.
Steve, did you want to add anything?
Nothing other than the fact that, say I'm a contender and I'm looking for a wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. I personally would not hesitate to offer up a first next year for someone like Cooper, as long as he's healthy, as long as he's producing. That's something I'm absolutely doing. I don't, talk too much about Cooper just because I don't really want people knowing how much I like him, on Twitter, that kind of thing. So it's kind of a sneaky hush thing I do. But, one of my last articles I did write for Dynasty Pros was the Amari Cooper Dynasty Dilemma. I had him as a major buy, and he returned last year as a wide receiver 1. So that tells you all I need to know about, or how you need to know about my thoughts on Amari Cooper. So I'm all in until he can't play for sure.
Love it. So James, let's kick off our second round of players. Who's your second buy low, sell high?
So my second one's going to be John Metchie. And this is more of a kind of a lottery ticket type of thing where I think the main factor to going out and buying Metchie is that this Houston offense is in such an interesting transition point where almost all of their skill position is young, relatively unproven. You have Robert Woods there as the wide receiver 1, but let's call it what it is. That's more of a locker room guy, leader. It's more of a formality. He's not going to end the season as that team's wide receiver 1. And I think the rest of the people in that room, John Metchie's just the most talented. He's, coming off a lot of missed time with the knee injury and then the leukemia diagnosis, but he was, everyone wants to rant and rave about Jameson Williams, and 2021, him and JMO were the wide receiver duo for Alabama. And if you're somebody who only looks at the bare bones stats, you're going to see 400 more yards for JMO and say, okay, it's not close. But when you kind of really dig in, John Metchie was that team's wide receiver 1. He finished with almost 20 more targets, about 350 less yards with 2 less games. I'm sorry, I didn't mean targets. I meant receptions. Little bit less yardage on less games. And when you watch the tape, he's all over the field, where Jameson Williams is effectively their home run ball guy. And I don't really think it makes sense for the community to be so high on Jameson Williams. I've seen some trades that he goes in where I just simply can't pay that for a guy who's going to miss, all that time with the ACL, then 6 more games of a suspension. But at the moment, because of everything that's up in the air with Houston and with Metchie himself finally getting back, he's effectively free. So it's not going to cost a lot at all to get him on your team. And then even just kind of like a little bit of a pop, he finishes maybe in the top 30 wide receivers. I would be wary of the fact that D'Amico Ryans as the new head coach, Damian Pierce and Devin Singletary there. I would kind of expect that team moving forward. CJ Stroud, rookie quarterback. They're probably going to look to play, Kyle Shanahan 49ers ball until they kind of get their footing under them, where it's going to be maybe the next couple of years, heavy emphasis on the run, the zone gap scheme, and heavy defense. They have a great secondary. Stingley and Pitre kind of showed out as rookies last year. They just drafted Will Anderson. So I'm not thrilled about the long-term prospects as far as volume goes and things like that for Metchie. But just coming into this year, talking about how value can blow up, if there's any bet you want to take in that Texans pass catching room, it's going to be John Metchie. I personally don't believe it's particularly close.
What would you feel comfortable paying for John Metchie right now? I think his value, I would say, and I mean, not that I'm a huge keep trade cut guy, but I think this is about fair where it's like, I think you would have to pay a second round pick to go get him right now, just because the person that had him last year probably just held him on their IR or their taxi, and they're probably just as excited as you are. Would you pay a second for John Metchie, or would you rather just draft a wide receiver in the second round next year?
I think it depends on the draft pick situation of the particular person's team who's looking to grab him. If you can kind of look ahead and project, okay, this isn't going to be a top 3, top 4 second round pick. I mean, I would kind of snap that off in a heartbeat, because I think next year's wide receiver class, and also, preface, I'm not particularly a Devy guy. So while I am a big college football fan, I don't have the kind of insight to the up and coming class like some of our Devy guys might. But I think next year's wide receiver class is particularly top heavy. I think after you get past the 2 from Ohio State, maybe Johnny Wilson, maybe Cowling from Arizona, maybe once you get past like the top 3 guys ish, it's a little bit of a drop off for me. And it almost feels like recycling, right? Like if I can get Metchie for a second, well, I'm just going to end up turning around with that second and redrafting John Metchie, if you will, next year. So, I mean, I think I'd rather make that move now and try to accumulate a little bit of trade value for next offseason rather than just holding on to that meaningless 24 pick.
Steve, if you have anything to add, and then feel free to go into your number 2 after.
Yeah, for sure. So real quick on Metchie, I love this pick. And since you're talking about what would you trade for him, just this Saturday, I traded which is projected to be the 210 next year for Metchie straight up. It was a league I had 2 seconds in, so I gave the later of the 2. I felt very good about that with what my roster was in need of. And then just last night, I completed a trade. I sent away Mike Williams, who was essentially my 5th wide receiver on that particular team, for Metchie and what should be an early 3rd. So in that one, so Metchie has been a guy I've been trying to acquire all off season, and every startup I've went into this spring and summer. So in that particular case, I wanted to kind of cut Mike Williams loose, even though he could be due for a big year this year. So I've bought him twice, and I've gotten shares of him just twice here, just in the last 3 days. So I feel great about that. I'm very confident in Metchie, especially with the lack of draft capital the Texans have going into next year's draft. That kind of tells you that they do like that group of guys they have now with Nico and with Metchie and stuff. So I completely agree with James. I think Metchie is definitely the most talented, definitely the one you want of that group, for sure. Now, transitioning into my next player to buy now and sell later, it will be Isaiah Likely, the tight end out of the Ravens, obviously a backup tight end, currently going as a tight end 28 with Fantasy Pros ADP right now. Obviously, he has an elite option in front of him in Mark Andrews. So it's one of these things where you have to be very patient if you are trying to buy him now. However, last year as a rookie, he did finish as a tight end 1 in 3 of the weeks that he played over 60% of the snaps, 2 of those with touchdowns, 1 without touchdowns. Normally, you get a touchdown from your tight end and you get your nut, you know what I mean? But in this case, small sample size of him producing at a high level at a position that really has been proven to be an advantage edge in fantasy football. So like you mentioned about Todd Monken being now the offensive coordinator there, I love that influence on that offense. So especially with Lamar locked up for multiple seasons here, the only downside is that he has the elite option in Mark Andrews ahead of him, who, isn't a spring chicken anymore. Not that he's going to be retired anytime soon. So a little bit of patience will be required there for Likely, but tight end 28. I mean, that is just way too cheap as far as I'm concerned. I don't think that price point to at least to draft him is going to stay. I want to get as much Isaiah Likely as I can, as I did last year for basically free in rookie drafts, where he either went undrafted or you got him like late in the 4th or 5th.
Yeah, I mean, I think Isaiah Likely is one of those guys that could have let's call him the Mike Davis of tight ends if Andrews ever goes down, where he has that year where you're just like, you've got to be kidding me, man. Like, what just happened? Yeah, I mean, I love Fantasy Pros. If he's going tight end 28, I am scooping that up all off season. I know KTC has him closer to 18, which I think is getting a little sketchy, but it depends on it kind of, just like you said, like, it really depends on the price. Like, I would love to be able to flip, like, let's say Tyler Higbee has a good game, Gerald Everett has a good game. I think that's a trade that could get done if the Likely owner is getting impatient and needs tight end production, because, like you said, this dude can obviously ball. We just got to hope he finds a role. And, I think kind of what you were saying is it might be worth to go buy him, that maybe he's the wide receiver 1 on that team behind Andrews being the tight end 1. Like, that's kind of what you're saying, possibly. I don't know. James, what do you think?
I think it's what's going to be really interesting to see with the Likely situation. And it's kind of a little bit what's keeping me from wanting to buy him is
you must love him
mid-season, where he was, Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, what do you mean? They're not our tight ends. They're our wide receivers. Like, that's how he viewed them and their skills in the passing game there. And I think that it's Todd Monken coming in. The one thing we know for sure is the passing volume is going to go up, but I'm a little wary of, and to the point, right, with the getting over 60% of the snaps, the weeks that he did that, he was kind of showing out. He proved he can play in this league. And so just it makes me a little bit wary of, well, was Zay Flowers Rashad Bateman insurance, or do they not trust their pass catchers as well as they want us to believe? And so I do agree with what he's kind of capable of. I also agree it's going to be a little bit of a patience approach, especially, I mean, if he's on your bench and Mark Andrews goes down, it's snap him right into tight end 1 and set and forget. But I think that for my liking, there's a little too many variables right now for me to want to go out and purchase him right now.
I'm gonna throw an example out, and I think this really aligns really well with what Isaiah Likely is. And how about we look back 3-4 years ago to Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert, right? We know the guy below him is a very talented guy. He just was stuck behind a very, very productive player. And, in that example, it did end up working out probably for Goddard owners. Now, he's been a little unhealthy, but I think we all know when Goddard's on the field, he's a great player. And I think, price is everything. That's what this entire show's about, right? Like, just because we're saying, would I trade blank for blank? I would do that, but it doesn't mean it's going to happen in your league. And that's why we have these shows, and that's why we have these discussions. So I'm going to move on to my number 2 player, and I'm actually going to stick with another tight end. I've been talking about this guy all off season, and I got to say, I just keep believing more and more, and that's Darren Waller. You just look at where he's going right now, and I think it's the epitome of what players hold in the offseason compared to what they hold when you have to start them on a weekly basis, right? And, like Darren Waller going around tight end 10 right now, and I just totally see this world that come late November, he's literally the tight end 2. And instead of getting tight end 10 price, you're selling for tight end 2 price, or you're just dominating your league with him, and he is the key to your victory. Now, obviously, tight end 10, his injury history baked in. I'm not pretending that that's not a thing. I just think, like, as much as I love the rookie tight ends, minus Dalton Kincaid. Do not talk poorly about my little baby boy, Dalton Kincaid. But I just think if you could move Metchie or Laporta for Darren Waller, I would do it just to flip Darren Waller for more than I think you could have traded those other players for. Like, there's not too much history of a rookie tight end coming in and dominating so much that their value grows like so immensely, with the exception of Kyle Pitts. But that's just like such an enigma of a value situation player that you almost can't even compare anything else to what Kyle Pitts' value was. And I mean, I still love him as a guy, but like, you tried to get Kyle Pitts a year and a half ago, like you got like flipped off from the guy that owned it because he was just not having it. And yeah, I just think it's like, you know, off season, people want their team to look pretty. And then during the year, you need fantasy points. And I think Darren Waller could be the perfect example of an early second today could net you, you know, let's say like the perfect example would be like, you know, Darren Waller today could net you the Javonte Williams who goes down with a knee injury tomorrow. And like, that's the trade that you could just totally see happening if someone needs a player to win and Darren Waller's going off. Steve, what do you think? Am I crazy or am I onto something here?
I mean, I normally try not to agree as much on these kinds of shows, but I literally have bought Darren Waller in a pretty decent prized league that I'm in. It's a 14-teamer. I'm basically in a win now mode. So I finished third the last 2 straight years. So I'm trying to get over that hump. So I'm planning on my first round pick to being very late. And I spent my first round pick on Darren Waller like the week after he signed on the Giants. So I'm with you. I'm all in. That was a gaping hole on that roster, trying to make a push to win it all. I'm 100% with you. So for me, that was completely worth it. And like, you know, the like little like sleeper like reactions, like, oh, or like the little poo thing. There was none of that. So everyone just kind of understood it. You know what I mean? Yeah. But so I'm with you. If there's a player I want, I just go get him. You know what I mean? It's like, if I see that thing I want, I just go get it. You know what I mean? So I guess I'm pretty aggressive as far as trying to acquire the guys I think can help my team. So I'm absolutely in a mode where I'd spend a late first on him if that was something that my roster needed, and I did it. So I'm with you.
James, would you like to add one note and then move on to your number 3 for the night?
I like Steve was saying, right? Like, it's not a fantastic thing when we all agree kind of throughout shows like this, but yeah, Waller's been my tight end target in redraft and best ball type of things for almost every draft and mock that I've done this offseason so far. And I think it's just kind of humorous how, you know, the joke is running around that, oh, the Giants couldn't have more slot wide receivers if they tried. But when we call a spade, I mean, Darren Waller is going to be the target hog in the middle of the field on that team this year. And, you know, I don't really see any way around that. But I do think it would be an interesting concept to see if you can't maybe flip him at some point later in the season or next off season for maybe his replacement in Daniel Bellinger. Giants were very public about the only reason they went out and got Waller was to kind of help Bellinger get to where he needs to be. Maybe you can flip him for him and a pick or two and stock yourself up with the same concept heading into the following season. But to move on to my third buy low, sell high. And I guess buy low is kind of relative here. But I'm looking at Hollywood Brown. Another very similar to Raachad White, right? The bulk of the value is in the fact that you look at this Cardinals offense and you're like, oh, God, this is not going to end well. So I think that for that reason, I mean, he's going in a range where I would probably rather take a chance on him than Michael Pittman. I would probably rather take a chance on him for a single season, not necessarily dynasty purposes, than maybe Treylon Burks, somebody like that coming into this year. So I think he's relatively affordable. but I think that there's a lot that kind of works in his favor and against him in terms of long-term value, so we don't know what's going to happen with Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray is not Jonathan Gannon's guy. There's been, maturity concerns throughout, and they are in prime position to pick up Caleb Williams. So however you kind of look at it, there's a talented quarterback throwing him the ball, but you don't know how that's going to play out. They did just bolster their offensive line a little bit with Paris Johnson Jr., but all things considered, it's not exactly an elite offensive line. And Hollywood Brown has kind of shown himself to be more of a burner. He's not a all route tree type of guy. And you're going to need, especially a rookie quarterback that can run, like Caleb Williams, or Kyler Murray's got his wheels as well. You want good protection for a wide receiver whose primary value relies in kind of deep passing and slow developing passing plays. And I'm just not confident that that's going to stick around regardless of what talent is throwing him the ball. And then kind of look at the fact that, so when I know DeAndre Hopkins isn't there anymore, but when DeAndre Hopkins came back, right? So when Hollywood Brown is the wide receiver 1 on that team during the Hopkins suspension, 10 or more targets in almost every single game. 6 receptions is the lowest in a game, and 88 yards and a touchdown on those 6 receptions. He had a game with 17 targets, 14 recs, and 140. So I'm just not sure that coming into this year, whether it's going to be Clayton Tune or Colt McCoy, I'm not sure he has the get up and go to really carry the passing game by himself, but the value boost comes from later in the season when Kyler Murray comes back and you got, that news is buzzing around, and then he can pick up a couple of games similar to like the 1 through 5 in 2022, where he's, okay, I've got my guy throwing me the ball again. You're going to get that late season spike where I think next offseason, you can move him for what a fair amount of managers, in my experience, are going to consider fringe wide receiver 1 return. And I mean, if you can, it's a dicey proposition. Why he's my third, not my first 2 selections for this format. But if you're in a position to make it work, I just think that there's no way you're going to be able to sell Hollywood for his ceiling right now. I think next offseason, you have a very good shot of convincing managers around your league that kind of wide receiver 1, the ceiling that he's got in various spurts here and there, is worth paying for.
Steve, do you have anything to add on that?
Not necessarily, except for the fact that obviously DeAndre Hopkins is no longer in town. I'm kind of iffy on the whole vacated targets thing, but either way, like, Hollywood is the guy there, so it may be a slow start to the year, but in that back end of the season when Kyler Murray's back, definitely think you could flip him for a little bit more than what obviously you're getting him now, because you think Colt McCoy, you know what I mean? But then like next year, Caleb Williams, all of a sudden he becomes quite the sexy option. So I do agree with James that will be a massive spike in what he could potentially be worth. But definitely the targets are pretty much there for him and him alone. We'll see about Rondale Moore and Michael Wilson and some of these guys, but I think he's definitely the guy that they're going to be targeting often.
Yeah, I like it. I think where he's going, I think he's very affordable to buy right now. The only note that I might add is I actually think you might get him cheaper like 4 weeks from now, to be honest, because we're going to watch him with Colt McCoy and it's not going to be pretty. And people might get even more, like, we think it's going to be bad, but it's the off season. We're all happy. We're all a little more positive. And then once we actually see that, remember that Hopkins game from late in the year when he had McSorley and it was like 13 targets, 2 catches or whatever. Yeah, that is totally within the realm of possibility for a couple games for Hollywood. And you might be getting him for a 4th round pick then. I'm obviously joking, but it might get worse. But I definitely think exactly what you're saying is true. 1 year from now, Kyler Murray is back. And if they're moving off Kyler, it's because something amazing happened and they have an even better option than Kyler. So the future is hopefully bright for him.
One last thing to add on that is, I guess, right, it depends on kind of how you view that quarterback situation, or I'm sorry, that trade situation, whether you're looking to, acquire him early in the offseason or kind of wait a little bit. If you're looking to acquire him early, you probably want Clayton Tune starting the season for them, coming from Houston, Dana Holgerson's air raid offense, right? Hollywood Brown makes sense as the perfect target to get Tune comfortable at the NFL level. But if you want to buy him a little bit later, maybe, in your league who's holding him isn't looking to sell right now or has a little too high a price, you probably want Colt McCoy, you assume there's going to be a little bit of drag in the first 4 weeks to get up and go,
100%. Steve, let's move on to your number 3 for the night.
So my number 3 for the night is just a player that I, in general, am probably rooting for the most in the league itself. Close second would be John Metchie, who we already talked about. But in this case, it's Justin Ross, the wide receiver out of the Chiefs. Start with the negative, the obvious negatives first. He was an obvious medical risk, which is why he went undrafted last year. However, as a freshman at Clemson, he looked like he was like the next big thing with Trevor Lawrence. Matt Waldman kind of likened his early college film to like early career like Julio Jones. So if that's his ceiling, like that's fantastic. But obvious medical concerns. He does profile as an X receiver, which is certainly lacking on the Chiefs' current roster. I think. Rashee Rice is kind of a similar size, but, maybe a little bit slower when Ross was at his peak health. And I actually just recently acquired him for what should be a late third in the OG Dynasty Pros Dynasty League. So, again, there's a player I want. I try to go get him. Ross is a guy I just am happier to have on my fantasy teams just so I can root for him. But obviously, through camp so far, he's shown out pretty well. Again, kind of with like the second team, not like in the first team offense or whatever. But a lot of the surrounding talent outside of Kelsey doesn't worry me a ton for what he could potentially provide on the field for the Chiefs offense.
Yeah, I mean, I still, to this day, remember his national championship game, watching him and just being like, 2 years from now, this dude's going number 1 overall in Dynasty leagues. And I remember having that memory and just being so just like sad for him when he started going through some of that stuff, because he just looked, having watched like Higgins and Williams come out of Clemson, and then you watched him and you're just like, that dude's better than they were. Like, you watched him, and at the time, you're like, he looked even better at that such a young age, that he was so good. And I'm with you. I've been trying to acquire him. No one's selling this dude, man. If you own this guy, you've been holding him for the entire time, and you will sit with him on your roster till the day he is out of the league. But if you can get your hands on him, just like you said, I totally agree. He because you're acquiring from what, like a third? I mean, I don't think anyone's paying a second. I probably wouldn't sell for a third, but I would offer a third. I don't know. What's your price point?
Yeah. So if I have them, I want them. So I want to be dazzled by an offer always, you know what I mean? But I did get them for what could be it's just projected to be a late third next year. So I was very happy to pay that. Again, this is a league where I had a second third. So it's just like, you want to do these kind of less or more risky moves if you have a little insulation to kind of protect yourself a little bit. So in that case, it just worked out perfectly. I got my guy and still had a little extra to kind of go along with it. But in a lot of leagues, it depends on the team. I could ship him away for a third. I could imagine that. But like you said, just with how I'm kind of rooting for him, I just want to see it. I just want to see it through. Another league, I actually tried this in 4 different leagues. I just sent a third for him. It got rejected almost immediately in 3 of them. Only one discussion said the guy said he'd do it for a second. I said I'm not doing that because that particular league I couldn't afford that. But then the other one in the Dynasty Pros league, it happened pretty quickly. So it's different strokes for different folks. So I was happy with that.
Perfect. James, did you want to add any notes before I move on to my number 3?
I think I agree with all the talk about his ceiling for sure. One thing I would be a little bit concerned about is kind of the Chiefs trying to figure out life after Tyreek Hill. And one of the things that they did a lot last season was run 12 personnel. They had a lot of 2 tight end sets. Now everyone knows Travis Kelce's the number 1 in that offense. But guys like Noah Gray and Jody Fortson were getting a lot of field time as the year progressed. And I think that when looking at the Chiefs wide receiver core in general, it almost feels like a split a little bit, right? Where it's like, well, I don't quite see how both Sky Moore and Justin Ross could have, bang up seasons. I think with Kelce doing what Kelce's going to do and them starting to move into more 2 tight end sets than they did when they had Tyreek Hill to stretch the field, I'm not entirely convinced that there's truly enough passing volume to go around for 3 or 4 different pass catchers on that team to finish top 20, top 25, top 30 at their respective positions. So, and me personally, I'm a bit of a Sky Moore truther. I think that the big one with him is that, non-Power 5 wide receivers typically take a while to get up. It's very rare that their rookie year is the year where you're like, oh, sure thing, look at who we drafted. Their sophomore season tends to be where they really start to shine in the NFL. And I guess for me, I'm just a little bit higher on Sky Moore than Justin Ross. But that's not to say I disagree with the ceiling and the potential he has. I just think it's going to be kind of a tough fit to find enough targets to go around to support Kelce plus,
Yeah.
Yep, 100%. That's fair.
Okay, so for my number 3 for the night, I'm going to continue my train here of doing guys that – let's see if you guys just totally love and you just think I'm totally freaking awesome. But I think this may break the train, but we will see. I'm going to go Jimmy G. And I think what I'm going off here is that at this point, the hate has gone so far that like non-starters are going ahead of him. And I just think like he is the starting quarterback there. He did sign a 3-year deal. Not that I expect him to be the starter for 3 seasons, but that price is just not very high right now. Like I think you could probably go get Jimmy G for a late second, to be honest, unless the dude is starting him on his team and will not move him. But if he's someone's QB3, QB4, it's not like Jimmy G's been leading anyone to championships the last couple of years. So I think he's very disposable off most teams. And I think this is one of those ones where, similar to kind of how I was talking about Cooper and Waller, actually, was go buy Jimmy G now, 8 weeks from now, 5 weeks from now, it doesn't really matter. Someone in your league's going to lose a quarterback, and then you just go flip Jimmy G to him right away. That is my number one thing I do in every startup I do is I draft 4 to 5 quarterbacks, and I go hit up everyone to get a first-round pick the next year for a quarterback. And at some point, you get one from someone because you need quarterbacks in Superflex leagues. And a quarterback, too, can be worth a late first. Even, I think Jimmy G I probably wouldn't be aiming first. I think his times of getting you a first-round pick may be gone. But let's say you pay a late second. I think you could get 2 seconds back. I'm not trying to reach for the moon here. You pay your 24 second, then halfway through the year, you get a 24 and a 25 second from someone because they need a quarterback. And I think for that one, I'm just not trying to overthink it. I just think people need startable players, especially startable quarterbacks. And I don't expect Jimmy G to be quarterback 9, quarterback 10, but he does know McDaniel's system. Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers are there. Adams still a great fantasy asset. I think Jacoby Myers is a great NFL asset. I'm not projecting him to be any more than a wide receiver 3, but he's going to score, and that division's going to put up points, and I think he's going to be usable more than people are giving him credit. Right now he's going quarterback 32 on Keep Trade Cut. Like, at that point, anyone going quarterback 32 can be a buy low, because that is the epitome of buying low. James, would you like to add anything on my man, Jimmy Garoppolo?
I think so. Nail on the head, right? I mean, he costs you effectively nothing to get with what his price point is this offseason. Superflex, fantastic. 1 QB, you're probably staying pretty far away. But I think the big variable in Jimmy G this season is going to be kind of whether or not Josh Jacobs is showing up for the Raiders at any point. Because I think that's a little bit up in the air right now. And I think that, especially on the franchise tag, right? I mean, if you've kind of made that relationship irreparable, or you didn't plan on offering him a second contract in the first place, you're probably going to, with a game manager style quarterback like Jimmy G, you're probably going to be inclined to run your superstar running back into the ground. So I don't know if I see the value spike late season to be able to flip them, maybe like some other people do. But as far as buying in, I mean, like I said, nail on the head. I mean, you're not gonna find a startable asset for cheaper. So,
Steve, would you like to add anything in?
Yeah, in startups this offseason, he definitely was a consistent a quarterback 3 option. He was one of the first guys that always goes into my queue, just because I know, like, just people are just so down on him. Like you said, it is just shocking, like, just how far the hate has gotten. I think there were some, like, legitimate concerns over his foot and his availability to play with the team and get caught up to speed in the offense, despite the being familiar with McDaniels. So I think that could have baked into the depreciated price a bit. I would have concerns over being able to flip him later, just because he kind of, from what I can recall, maybe lacks the ceiling, just because he's not a rushing type of a quarterback, where that would be a little bit more of an appeal, like back half of the season. But in that very specific scenario, which happens all the time, team loses a quarterback. If they're contender, they just really need that floor of a QB2. Definitely possible. It's definitely actionable. So, it's always is one of these things you never want to prepare for like doomsday, but that's an example that we run into all the time, like every single season, where, like, Kyler Murray goes down, halfway through the season last year. That would have been a great fit where, at least I can get something out of losing my superstar quarterback, So in that kind of a situation, I think it's definitely actionable to make that kind of thing happen for sure.
Awesome. Well, with that note, we are going to wrap up the show today. I really appreciate you guys coming on, joining me. One last thing we're going to do before we get out and let the viewers get out is I want you guys to let everyone know where they can find you, and rapid fire 1 to 2 more names, buy low, sell high, just the name, no info. If people have info, that's what your username is going to be for. They can reach out to you and ask you if they want anything on that. So James, go ahead, go first, and then Steve after that.
All right. So you can find me on the Bird app at jgorrell74, JGORRELL 74. You can find my published content at dynastypros.com. And as far as rapid fire goes, I think my last 2 rapid fire ones are going to be Javonte Williams, just because as of right now, Fantasy Pros has him ADP around running back 40 running back 16, 40 overall. I think that for the reports that have been coming out and what his health is trending, that's just far too low for Sean Payton's new Alvin Kamara. And the other one is going to be whoever ends up winning the Titans quarterback 2 job, because based on contract situation, whoever wins that job is effectively next year's starter by default. So there's a nice little value bump for you right there if you can buy him now.
Yeah, you can find me at Fantasy Ladder on most of the social media apps, but mostly using the website formerly known as Twitter. So at Fantasy Ladder. And the 2 names I had remaining were Jonathan Mingo, rookie wide receiver out of the Panthers, and second-year wide receiver Wan'Dale Robinson of the New York Giants. So hit me up if you want to hear my thoughts on them.
Sweet. Yeah, you guys can check me out at Where's Waldorf on Twitter, or if you really want to just like send me a letter or something, shoot me a DM. I'll give you my address. You can send something over. My last 2 names I didn't get to are David Montgomery and Raachad Penny. Both, I just think same thing. I think offseason we've heard their names for so many years. I think they're being devalued, but plugging them into a lineup, they could have more value than you're thinking right now. Other than that, make sure to reach out to all of us at Dynasty Pros, and thanks everyone for tuning in.